Good afternoon, class. Today I'm going to start by telling you a little story. There was once a young woman from Mexico named Consuela. And she came to New York to get work. She got a job at a factory owned by a man from Taiwan. One day, Consuela came to work, and her boss, remember he's from Taiwan, handed her a red envelope. She looked inside and saw $50. What do you think she did? She became very upset, and she threw the envelope back at him. Her boss was totally shocked. Can you guess why? Well, he had given her the red envelope and the money because it was the Chinese New Year. And on the Chinese New Year, it's traditional to give money to young people for good luck. But Consuela didn't know about this custom, and so she was very insulted when he gave her this money. Now, this is a good example of how customs can cause misunderstandings. And that's the reason why it's very good to learn about customs of different countries. That will avoid a lot of problems. So I come to the topic of the lecture today. The topic is this: cultures have different customs, and an action in one culture can have a totally different meaning in another culture. As you saw in an example of our story, Consuela was insulted, but the boss was really trying to do something very nice. So every culture has its own rules for appropriate and inappropriate behavior. Serious misunderstandings can occur, like the one with Consuela and her boss, if we don't know other people's cultural rules. Let me illustrate this point by giving you examples from 4 areas. So we're going to have 4 different areas. First, I'm going to talk about greetings, how people greet each other. Greet, hello. This is very different in different countries. Next will be the way people use names and titles. Next, the way people eat. And finally, the way people exchange gifts. Are you ready? Okay, let's look at the first area. As you remember, we're going to talk about ways of greeting, how people behave when they say hello. Now, you probably know that in the United States, in fact in Western world in general, it's very common for people to touch when they greet. It can be a handshake, it can be a hug. If people are very close, it could even be a kiss. Now, most Western countries are similar in this respect. Some are more intimate than others. For example, in France, it's much more common to kiss someone when you meet them than it is in England. It's more common in America than in England, but more common in France than America. So they differ, but the basic point is people do touch when they meet. It's very different in Asia. In Asian countries, people do not touch when they meet. It's considered abnormal, and people are uncomfortable touching when they meet. What do I mean by this? In Japan, people bow to each other. They don't exchange any touching of any sort. Also in Thailand. In Thailand also, people put their hands in front of them. It's called the way, to greet each other. So they hold their hands as a prayer position. That's a way of greeting. Now you can imagine what would happen if an American went to Japan or Thailand and tried to put his hands on the person he's meeting. They would be shocked. This would not be accepted. Very embarrassing. Very acceptable in Latin America and Mexico, less so in the United States. So you notice different ways of greeting. Now I'd like to talk about another area where cultures differ, and that is in how they use names. Now if you go to America, you'll hear people calling each other by their first name. Hey Dave, hi Joe, "Hi, Jack." Well, however, you'll find that this is not true in some other countries. For example, in Europe, it would be more likely that people would say Mr. Martinez or Miss Schultz or Mrs. Delarier. So people are more formal in Europe than in America. How is it in Asia? Is it the same? Yes. In places in Asia also, people are more formal. You don't use first names very easily. In fact, in Korea, they like to use titles. So you address someone as Manager Kim or Teacher Joe, and so they use a title, like doctor is a title and Mr. Okay, and so they like to use titles like engineer and teacher. Let's move on to our third area, and that is about eating. Now, I don't mean what people eat. That's interesting too, but I mean how they eat. And one of these is what they use to eat. We call these the utensils. Now, in some countries, you use different utensils. If you're in an Asian country, Japan or China, you use a chopsticks. You know, the chopsticks to eat the food. If you're in the West, meaning in Europe or America, you're going to be using silverware, knife, spoon, fork, as we've learned about. Other areas are traditional, places like India, the Middle East. They will use their hands when eating. So these are different ways of eating. Another part of eating is how much you have on your plate. Now, in Egypt, you should leave some food on your dish at the end of the meal. Otherwise, it looks like you're still hungry. However, if you go to Bolivia in South America, you're expected to eat everything on your plate. This is also true in America. In America, a clean plate indicates you are happy with the food. Now, finally, I'd like to talk about gift giving. The rules of gift giving can be complicated and embarrassing if you don't know them. Now, in the United States, if you're invited to someone's house for dinner, it's usual to bring along flowers or a small gift. But not if it's a business. If it's business, no. But if it's a personal, good to bring a gift or flowers. Now, in countries such as Japan, you always give gifts, whether it's business or not business. Gift giving is something you do all the time. You give a gift to your teacher. You give a teacher to the medical doctor. You give teacher. So gifts there are a very common part of business life. It's a very ancient tradition, and in Japan, it's also important that you wrap your gift very nicely. You don't just give the thing itself. It must be wrapped very nicely. Another thing is what you give. Flowers have different meanings. In some countries, yellow flowers can be a very bad thing to give to someone. So, in conclusion, what I wanted to make clear to you today is that different customs in different countries. So, I think it will make you clear that the best way of doing something is different in one country from another. So if you're going to another country, learn about their customs so that you will have a nice time and you won't be embarrassed and they won't be offended.